When the quiet man in the navy suit stood up and asked for the microphone, they chuckled and waved him off. Someone even said, "Sit down, friend, this ain't the time." That was May 17th, 2008, inside the Riverview Country Club in Bowling Green, Kentucky. The room was celebrating the sale of 400 acres they thought belonged to them. Crystal glasses clinked. Men in tuxedos loosened their bow ties and laughed about property values. What nobody realized was that every inch of ground under their feet, every chandelier above their heads, and every dollar they were toasting had been stolen from his family 18 years earlier. The man in the navy suit didn't come to yell. He didn't come to shame anyone or make a scene. He came for his daughter's future, and he'd been waiting a very long time to make this right. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Most folks in town only knew Marcus Reynolds as the high school biology teacher who still drove the same blue Ford F-150 he'd bought in 1996. He was 52 years old, kept his hair cut short and neat, and always wore that same navy suit to weddings and funerals because it was the only one he owned. His daughter Kaylee was 15, played flute in the marching band, and helped him grade quizzes over pepperoni pizza on Friday nights. They lived in a small brick house on Scottsville Road with a carport that leaked when it rained hard and a backyard barely big enough for a vegetable garden. Nobody in Bowling Green connected the biology teacher in the little brick house with the richest piece of land in Warren County. Nobody remembered that Marcus Reynolds came from money, or that his family had owned those 400 acres longer than most families in town had been alive. But Marcus remembered. Every single day, he remembered. He kept a yellowed survey map folded inside his Bible, tucked between the Book of Psalms and the Book of Proverbs. Sometimes, late at night after Kaylee went to bed, he'd take it out and trace the property lines with his finger. The 2 ponds his granddaddy had dug by hand. The big white farmhouse his great-granddaddy built in 1902. The rolling hills where he used to ride horses as a boy. All of it gone now. Paved over or built on top of, turned into something that didn't belong to his family anymore. When that country club invitation arrived in the mail, addressed to all landowners in the historic district, Marcus looked at it for a long time. Then he told Kaylee, "Baby, I think it's finally time we go back." She asked what he meant. He just smiled and said, "You'll see." The summer of 1990 was the last summer Marcus Reynolds felt like his life made sense. He was 34 years old, married to Laura, the prettiest girl from Barron County who'd agreed to marry a farmer's son. They had a little girl named Kaylee who was just learning to walk. Marcus taught biology at the high school during the year and helped his daddy, Elijah, work the farm in the summers. 400 acres of the prettiest land left in Warren County. Rolling hills covered in bluegrass, 2 spring-fed ponds that never went dry, even in the worst droughts. A big white farmhouse with a wraparound porch where 4 generations of Reynolds men had been born. Elijah grew tobacco on the south fields and raised black Angus cattle on the north pasture. He believed a handshake was stronger than any paper you could sign, and he ran his business that way. Honest, simple, the way his daddy had taught him. That summer, the county commissioners came calling. They had plans for an industrial park and a golf resort. They said it would bring jobs. They said it would put Bowling Green on the map. They said Elijah's land was right in the middle of everything they needed to make it happen. They came with lawyers in expensive suits and a check that sounded big to most people but wasn't near enough for what that land was worth. Not to Elijah. That land had been in the Reynolds family since 1867. His granddaddy had bought it with money he saved from sharecropping. His daddy had built the farmhouse with timber cut from those very hills. Elijah had raised his own son on that land, taught him how to work hard and keep his word. He looked those commissioners in the eye and said no. He said it politely. He said it firmly. He said it the way a man says something when he knows he's right and doesn't need to argue about it. 3 months later, they took it anyway. Eminent domain. Marcus had never heard those words before, but he learned what they meant real fast. The government could take your land if they decided the public needed it more than you did. They'd pay you fair market value, they said. Except the value they decided on was half what the land was worth, and a quarter of what developers would pay for it later. Elijah hired a lawyer, but the lawyer said there wasn't much he could do. Eminent domain cases almost always went in favor of the government. The best they could hope for was a slightly better payout. Elijah refused to sign. He told them they'd have to drag him off that land in handcuffs. They didn't drag him off. They just waited until the legal window closed, declared him in contempt, and sent the bulldozers in at dawn one Tuesday morning in November. Marcus stood with his daddy and watched them tear down the farmhouse. Elijah didn't cry. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets and his jaw set tight. But something inside him broke that day. Marcus could see it. 10 months later, Elijah Reynolds died of a heart attack in his sleep. He was 61 years old. The doctor said it was probably stress and high blood pressure, but Marcus knew better. His daddy had died of a broken heart. You can't take a man's land, the land his family worked for over 100 years, and expect him to just move on like nothing happened. Elijah had moved into a rental house in town, tried to start over, but he was never the same. He stopped going to church, stopped talking much, just sat on the little porch of that rental and stared out at nothing. When he died, Marcus was the one who found him. He was also the one who had to bury him. And he did it with money he didn't have because everything his daddy owned had been taken or sold to pay legal fees that didn't amount to anything. Marcus was 34 years old, watching his wife Laura fight the breast cancer that would take her 5 years down the road. He had a toddler daughter who needed diapers and food and a roof over her head. He sold what little was left of his daddy's things, moved his family into the smallest house he could afford, and took a full-time job teaching biology at the same high school he'd graduated from. He never told a soul about the anger he carried. Never told anyone about the nights he couldn't sleep because he kept seeing that farmhouse come down. Never told anyone that he still had the original property deeds locked in a safe deposit box at First National Bank. Because buried in those deeds, in the fine print nobody had bothered to read, were two things the county and the developers had missed: the mineral rights, and a reversion clause that said if the land wasn't used for the stated public purpose within 20 years, ownership would revert back to the Reynolds family. Marcus kept teaching, kept coaching JV baseball on Friday nights, kept showing up to parent-teacher conferences and grading papers at the kitchen table. When Laura died in 1995, he kept going because Kaylee needed him to. He packed her lunches. He braided her hair even though he wasn't very good at it. He went to every band concert and every school play. He taught her how to drive in that old blue Ford. He helped her with her math homework and let her stay up late on weekends watching old movies. People in town thought Marcus Reynolds was just a good man doing his best after losing his wife. And he was. But he was also a man with a plan. A man who checked the county records every 6 months. A man who watched as they built the country club and the golf course and the luxury condos. A man who knew, all along, that the clock was ticking. By 2007, Kaylee was 14 years old and starting to think about college. She was smart, real smart, straight A's, honor roll, talked about maybe becoming a teacher like her dad or maybe a veterinarian. Marcus knew she could do anything she set her mind to. He also knew he didn't have the money to send her to college. Teachers don't make much, especially in Kentucky. He'd been putting away $20 a week when he could, but it wasn't enough. Not even close. Student loans were an option, but Marcus didn't want that for her. He didn't want her starting her adult life buried in debt. He wanted better for Kaylee. He wanted what his daddy had wanted for him. A fair shot. A clean start. So when he opened the mail one afternoon in April of 2008 and saw the invitation to the Riverview Country Club's Spring Gala, he sat down at the kitchen table and read it 3 times. The invitation was printed on thick cream-colored cardstock with gold lettering. It was addressed to all historic landowners and stakeholders in the Riverview Development Project. There would be dinner, dancing, a silent auction, and a special presentation celebrating the completion of Phase 2, which included the sale of an additional 200 acres for luxury condos and a new clubhouse. Marcus looked at the date, May 17th. He looked at the return address, Riverview Country Club, 4782 Old Nashville Road. That was his land, or it used to be. The country club sat right where his granddaddy's tobacco barn had been. The golf course covered the south pasture. The luxury condos were going up on the hills where Marcus used to ride horses as a boy. And according to the documents Marcus had been quietly collecting for 18 years, not a single shovel of dirt had been used for the public industrial park the county claimed they needed the land for. It had all been sold to private developers, which meant the reversion clause was enforceable. Marcus didn't tell Kaylee right away. He wanted to be sure. He took a personal day from school and drove to Frankfurt to meet with a real estate attorney named Patricia Moss. She was in her 60s, sharp as a tack, and didn't suffer fools. Marcus laid out everything: the original deeds, the eminent domain filing, the reversion clause, the county records showing the land had been sold to private developers instead of used for public purpose. Patricia put on her reading glasses and went through every page. It took her 2 hours. When she finally looked up, she said, "Mr. Reynolds, you've got one hell of a case. Why did you wait so long?" Marcus said, "Because I wanted to be ready, and I wanted to do it right." Patricia smiled. She said, "Well, you did. This land is still legally yours. You could fight this in court and win, or you could settle privately. What do you want?" Marcus thought about his daddy standing in front of that bulldozer. He thought about Laura and how she always said kindness was the hardest kind of strength. He said, "I want them to do the right thing. And I want my daughter to go to college." Patricia drafted a settlement proposal. Fair market value for the 400 acres, based on current appraisals, not the lowball offer from 1990. Every penny would go into an irrevocable trust for Kaylee's education and future. In exchange, Marcus would sign over permanent ownership and release all claims. It was more than fair. It was generous. Patricia said most men in his position would take them to court and wring out every dime they could. Marcus said, "I'm not most men. I just want what's right." He had Patricia prepare 2 copies of everything. One set to present privately. One set to file in court if they refused. Then he went home, hung his navy suit on the back of the bedroom door, and waited for May 17th. The night of the gala, Marcus told Kaylee he had to go to a work thing. She asked if she could come. He said not this time. He put on his navy suit, the same one he'd worn to Laura's funeral and his daddy's before that. He drove the blue Ford across town to the Riverview Country Club and parked in the back of the lot where the overflow cars went. He sat there for a minute, engine ticking as it cooled, and said a quiet prayer. Not for revenge, not for victory. Just for the courage to do what he came to do. Then he got out, tucked the envelope of documents under his arm, and walked inside. The country club was everything his daddy's farmhouse wasn't. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers on every table. A 10-piece band played jazz standards while waiters in white jackets carried trays of shrimp cocktail and champagne. Men in tuxedos stood in clusters, laughing too loud. Women in evening gowns admired each other's jewelry. Marcus recognized some of the faces: county commissioners, developers, a few lawyers. The mayor, none of them recognized him. Why would they? He was just the high school biology teacher, the guy who showed up to school in khakis and a tie, who ate lunch in his classroom, who drove a truck with 180,000 miles on it. He wasn't part of their world. Except he was. He'd always been part of this world. They'd just forgotten. Marcus stood near the back and listened to the speeches. The head of the development group, a man named Richard Hartwell, stood at the podium and talked about vision and progress. He talked about turning Bowling Green into a destination. He talked about preserving the heritage of the land while building for the future. Marcus almost laughed at that part. Preserving heritage, they'd bulldozed his family's heritage 18 years ago. When Hartwell asked if anyone wanted to say a few words about the importance of preserving the community's history, Marcus raised his hand. The room turned to look at him. A few people smiled politely. One man near the front chuckled and said something under his breath. Hartwell squinted toward the back, didn't recognize Marcus, and said, "Sir, this portion is really for stakeholders," and Marcus walked forward. He didn't rush. He just walked steady and calm down the center aisle between the round tables with their white linens and flickering candles. When he reached the front, Hartwell handed him the microphone with a tight smile. Marcus didn't take it. He set his envelope on the head table, right next to Hartwell's champagne glass, and looked out at the room. 150 people staring at him, silent now, curious, maybe a little annoyed. Marcus said, "My name is Marcus Reynolds. My family owned this land for 123 years before the county took it in 1990. They said it was for the public good. They said it was for an industrial park that would bring jobs to working families. But that's not what happened, is it?" The room got quieter. Someone's fork clinked against a plate. Hartwell's smile disappeared. Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out the documents. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. He just laid the papers on the table, one by one, like he was showing evidence in a courtroom. The original deed, signed by his great-great-granddaddy in 1867. The eminent domain order from 1990. The reversion clause, highlighted in yellow, clear as day. The county records showing the land had been sold to private developers within 3 years. The current survey showing the country club, the golf course, and half the new luxury condos sat on land that still legally belonged to the Reynolds family. Marcus said, "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I didn't come here to make a scene. I came here because my daughter starts college next fall, and I want her to be able to go without drowning in debt. I came here because I believe people can do the right thing if you give them the chance." He pulled out the settlement agreement Patricia had drafted. He laid it on top of the other papers. He said, "This is a fair offer. Fair market value for the land. Everything goes into a trust for my daughter. You get a clean title and we all move forward. Or we can go to court and let a judge decide. Either way, I'm not leaving here tonight without an answer." The silence in that room was the kind you feel in your chest. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Hartwell picked up the documents with shaking hands and started reading. His face went pale. He looked at the county attorney, who was sitting 2 tables over. The attorney stood up, came over, read the papers himself. He whispered something to Hartwell. Hartwell's jaw clenched. He looked at Marcus and said, "You've been sitting on this for 18 years. Marcus said, "I've been waiting for the right time. This is it." Another man, one of the developers Marcus didn't recognize, stood up and said, "You can't just walk in here and—" Marcus turned to him. His voice stayed calm. He said, "I can. And I did. My daddy trusted the people in this room once. He believed a handshake and a fair deal still meant something. They broke his heart, and it killed him. I'm choosing to believe you'll do better tonight." That's when something shifted. Maybe it was the way Marcus said it. Maybe it was the weight of knowing he was right and they were wrong. Maybe it was just that nobody wanted this fight to go public. The county attorney leaned over and whispered to Hartwell again. Hartwell closed his eyes for a long moment, then nodded. He picked up the settlement agreement and said, "Give me a pen." Someone handed him one. The room stayed silent as he signed his name. Then the county attorney signed. Then 2 of the developers. Each signature was another acknowledgement, another admission, another step toward making it right. When the last one signed, Marcus folded the papers carefully and tucked them back into the envelope. He said, "Thank you. I mean that. This is the right thing." Then he turned and walked back down that center aisle, past all those tables, past all those people in their tuxedos and evening gowns, and out the front doors into the cool May night. He sat in his truck for a long time before he started the engine. His hands were shaking, not from fear or anger, but from relief. From the weight of 18 years finally lifting off his shoulders. He thought about his daddy, about Laura, about Kaylee asleep at home, dreaming about marching band and college and a future she didn't know had just been secured. He thought about how easy it would have been to walk into that room angry, to make them suffer the way his family had suffered. But that's not who he was. That's not who Laura had raised Kaylee to be. Kindness, she used to say, is just love with its sleeves rolled up. You don't have to be loud to be strong. You just have to be steady. Marcus still teaches biology at Bowling Green High School. Still drives the same blue Ford, though it's got over 200,000 miles on it now. Still coaches JV baseball on Friday nights. Kaylee graduated from Western Kentucky University in 2012, debt-free, with a degree in elementary education. She teaches third grade now at the same school where her daddy works. She met a good man named Daniel, married him in a little ceremony at the courthouse, and they've got 2 kids of their own. Marcus is Papa now. He takes his grandkids fishing at Barren River Lake and tells them stories about their great-granddaddy Elijah and the farm that used to be. He doesn't tell them about the night at the country club. Not yet, maybe someday. For now, it's enough that they know their family comes from good people who worked hard and kept their word. The old farmhouse is gone. The fields where Marcus used to ride horses are covered in condos now. But a scholarship fund at Western Kentucky University carries the names Elijah and Laura Reynolds. Every year it pays for 2 students from Warren County to go to college. Kids who work hard. Kids who need a fair shot. Kids like Marcus used to be. And every spring, when the dogwoods bloom along the edge of the golf course that used to be rows of tobacco, Marcus drives past and remembers. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just with the quiet knowledge that he did what his daddy couldn't. He made it right. He got his family's dignity back without losing his own. Some folks in town still don't know the full story. They think Marcus is just the biology teacher in the Navy suit. The guy who shows up to every school event and never makes a fuss about anything. And that's fine. Marcus doesn't need them to know. He doesn't need credit or recognition. He just needed his daughter to have what he never got. A chance. A future. A life that wasn't buried under someone else's broken promises. And he got it, not by being loud, not by being mean, just by being steady, just by waiting for the right moment and doing what needed to be done. Grace, he tells people when they ask for advice, is just love with its sleeves rolled up. You don't win by being the loudest person in the room. You win by being the one who's still standing when the dust settles. If you've ever watched your family lose something precious and still chose to be kind, drop a heart below and tell us where you're watching from tonight. If quiet strength still matters in this loud world, hit subscribe and the bell. We'll see you in the next one.